Avignon, late summer 1348. A physician undresses by candlelight and finds under his left arm a swelling the size of an egg. He knows what it is. He has been treating it for weeks. Every patient he has touched with this same diagnosis is dead. Most physicians by this point have already fled the city. Guy de Chauliac reaches for his quill. This is the man who refused to run from the Black Death and the record he left behind. You're watching The Fallen Kingdom, medieval history written from the documents that survived. Subscribe and follow every case. What we uncover next, you won't want to miss. In 1346, the world made sense. Europe was a working machine. Kings held thrones. Bishops held cities. Peasants held the land that fed everyone, and held it for a lord they had never met, on terms they had not chosen. It was unfair. It was rigid. But it worked. And above it all sat the church, the largest institution in Europe, with an explanation for everything. Why did the rain come? God. Why did the harvest fail? God. Why did the child die in the cradle? God had his reasons. They were not for you to know. And the men who understood the natural world, the physicians, worked from a framework 1200 years old, written by a Greek named Galen, and refined by Arab scholars in centuries since. Health was the balance of four humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile. Disease was their imbalance. The cure was to restore the balance, by bleeding, by purging, by diet. It was not, by modern standards, science, but it was a system, and the people who used it believed it worked. The most accomplished of them all was a peasant-born surgeon from a village in the south of France. He had risen, through 40 years of work, to the most prestigious medical post in Christendom, personal physician to the Pope. His name was Guy de Chauliac, and he was about to be tested in a way his framework could not prepare him for. It came from the east. In October 1347, a fleet of Genoese galleys arrived at the port of Messina in Sicily. They were dying as they came ashore. Within weeks, the port itself was dying. Within months, so was the rest of the island. From Sicily, it crossed to mainland Italy. From Italy north to France. By January 1348, it was in Marseille. By spring, in Avignon, the city of the Pope. The speed of it was the first thing that broke people. Plagues in the medieval imagination were slow. They came, they killed, they receded. This one did not move like a plague. It moved like fire. A chronicler in Tournai, drawing what he saw, recorded it like this: not the symptoms, not the bodies, but the burial. Coffin after coffin, carried by men whose faces are calm, because there is no time left to grieve. In Avignon, the cemeteries filled within weeks. Pope Clement VI consecrated the Rhône, declared the river itself holy ground, so that bodies could be dropped into the water and counted as buried. And the physicians in their consilia and their treatises wrote down what they were seeing. Guy de Chauliac, watching the disease take Avignon, noticed something his colleagues did not. There were two diseases. One killed slowly with black swellings, buboes, rising in the neck and armpit and groin. The other killed in days, with the lungs filling, the breath going wet and red. He wrote them down as separate forms of the same disaster. He was the first to set it down as a systematic clinical observation, and he did it without ever knowing what either one was. In October 1348, King Philip VI of France asked the medical faculty of the University of Paris for an explanation. They gave him one. On the 20th of October, they delivered a treatise, the Compendium de Epidemia, the most authoritative medical document Europe had produced on the disaster. It said that the cause was a conjunction of 3 planets on the 20th of March 1345 in the house of Aquarius: Saturn, Jupiter, and Mars. This had, they wrote, corrupted the air. Bad air. Miasma. It was the most respectable medical opinion in Christendom, and it was wrong. Treatments followed the diagnosis: burn aromatic woods, drink vinegar, avoid the bathhouses, bleed the patient to balance the humours. In Avignon, Guy de Chauliac prescribed for Pope Clement VI a precaution drawn from the same framework. 2 large braziers kept burning in the papal chamber day and night. The heat, he reasoned, would purify the air. The Pope survived the plague. Whether it was the fires or chance, no one could say. Most others, treated with the same remedies, did not. Clement himself, according to one tradition, came to doubt the fires were doing anything. He stayed in the city regardless, supervising burials, the pastoral care of the dying. He never caught the disease. And when medicine could not explain the catastrophe, people reached for older explanations. Across Europe, the flagellants walked from town to town, scourging their own backs and believing that God could be appeased by suffering. It did not work. And then came the darkest answer of all. In the autumn of 1348, a rumour began in the Swiss Confederacy and spread west, faster than the plague itself. The Jews, it said, had poisoned the wells. It was nonsense. But the towns of Europe, Basel, Strasbourg, Mainz, Cologne, reached for it like a man reaches for a rope. On the 14th of February 1349, St. Valentine's Day, in the city of Strasbourg, as many as 2,000 Jewish men, women, and children, most of the city's Jewish community, were rounded up in their own quarter and killed by their neighbours. The plague had not yet reached the city. 2 men in this moment refused the rope. On the 6th of July 1348, and again on the 26th of September, Pope Clement VI issued 2 papal bulls from Avignon. The second was called Quamvis Perfidiam. In them he condemned the killings and did something almost no one else in Europe did. He argued from evidence. The plague, he wrote, could not be the work of the Jews because the plague was killing the Jews as well. And in the same city, in the same months, his physician was reaching the same conclusion by a different road. Guy de Chauliac, who had observed the disease moving from body to body, rejected the well-poisoning charge in his own clinical writing. He knew what he was watching, and what he was watching was not a poisoning. Neither man could cure the disease, neither man could explain it. But when the world reached for a scapegoat, both of them, a pope and a physician, refused to take hold of it. By 1352, the worst was over. The plague did not leave Europe. It would return in waves for the next 300 years. But the first great mortality had ended. Estimates of the dead vary. Modern scholarship places the toll between 30% and 60% of the European population. In some cities, 2/3. More people had died in less time than at any point in recorded human history. And the survivors discovered something. There were no longer enough of them to do the work. Before the plague, labor had been cheap because labor had been plentiful. Peasants worked the land of their lord because there was nowhere else to go, and the lord could pay them almost nothing because someone else was always waiting. In 1349, no one was waiting. Wages in some regions doubled within a generation, tripled in others. Peasants began to walk off the land of one lord to take better terms from another. The system that had held Europe together for centuries was bleeding labor. In England in 1349, the King's government issued the Ordinance of Labourers. In 1351, the Statute of Labourers. It was simple. It froze wages at their pre-plague levels. It made it a crime for a peasant to demand more, and a crime for a lord to offer more. It did not work either. You cannot legislate a labor shortage out of existence. Within 30 years, the law was being routinely ignored. Within 50, it had collapsed. And with it, in much of Western Europe, the institution of serfdom itself. The standard story of the Black Death ends here, with a promise that the catastrophe was a beginning, that from it came the Renaissance, that out of the ruin grew the freer, richer, more curious Europe of the centuries that followed. It is a comfortable story. It is also not quite true. The plague did not build the modern world. What the plague did was test it. In Western Europe, in England, in France, in the Low Countries, the labor shortage broke serfdom. Wages rose. Peasants moved. Cities grew. Lords adapted or they lost. In Eastern Europe, in Poland, in Hungary, in Russia, the same labor shortage produced the opposite outcome. Lords with more political power and less competition used the shortage to tighten their grip. A new and crueler serfdom locked into place and lasted for the next 400 years. Same disease, same shortage, opposite outcomes. Because the catastrophe was a test, and the variable was never the plague. It was the people in charge. Guy de Chauliac lived another 16 years after Avignon. He never knew what caused the disease he had survived. He treated 3 popes in succession, and he never stopped writing. In his great treatise, completed in 1363, he set down what he had done. He wrote, "And I, to avoid infamy, not daring to absent myself, with continual fear, I treated myself as much as I could, using the said remedies." He did not cure it. He did not explain it. But when most of his profession ran, he stayed. He recorded, and he refused the lie that would have made him safer. That, not a cure, was the achievement. We ask a lot of a witness. We ask them to be there when no one wants to be there. We ask them to look when looking is dangerous. We ask them sometimes to write the truth down when the truth is the most expensive thing in the room. If this case stayed with you, the next one is already open. Subscribe, and we'll find it together. Every century has its secrets. We dig them up.